Hi, my name is Melissa Young. I'm in course 5104. I want to discuss strategic therapy, which is actually one of the first therapy models in the heading under marriage and family therapy. Strategic therapy was developed by Jay Haley, Chloe Madanis, and MRI Group in the mid 20th century. This is a form of therapy that works on solving problems that have become patterns of interaction with inside the family. These are called recursive cycles, and the therapist's job is, in this particular model, is to find what the problem is and then try to break the pattern. They're not necessarily looking at the why or the context of where it developed. So they take an active problem-solving stance and they focus on how the issue functions inside the context or the homeostasis of the family. And the strategic therapist intentionally tries to interrupt that pattern. So some of this comes from the work of Haley and Dallos and Draper, 1976 and 2010, respectively. Two of the interventions that I'm going to pull out are, one is called paradoxical interventions. In this, it's where the therapist chooses to do something that seems like a paradox. So, for example, there was a vignette with a lesbian couple where one woman felt like the other was not pulling her weight in the relationship, and she had to leave her tasks and things to work on every day, and her partner failed to do that. So the therapist said, okay, since you are focusing on what she's doing wrong, I want you to be really intentional about focusing on what she's doing wrong and write it down every day for 7 days. And in that, either there's going to be compliance or there's going to be some rebellion to that strategy. But in doing so, just having that client notice their own patterns possibly of looking and writing and looking for the wrong, maybe that will interrupt it. So this is a way to help a client actually become more awake and aware of what they're doing, and maybe even help them get a little bit of control over the repetitive cycle. This was referenced with Watzlawick, Weekland, and Fish in 1974. The other strategic therapy strategy or intervention I'd like to bring up is called an ordeal, and it assigns a task that's more effortful than maintaining the problem. And so in this vignette, there was a mother and daughter that fought fairly regularly, and so the therapist recommended that they go to ice cream and not talk about the fight right after any fight. And in so they want them to just have less reward in the argument and more reward in spending time together, again breaking the cycle. So these ordeals work because they make change more convenient than the problem. So this helps reframe things relationally as well. So shifting the sequence of behavior rather than analyzing the cause. So by changing the rules of engagement, strategic therapy promotes what Haley called second order change, which is a fundamental transformation for family structure to change. So for instance, in the ice cream ordeal, the mother and daughter experience a new emotional outcome following conflict, breaking the habitual withdrawal pattern. So similarly, the paradoxical tasks often heighten awareness of how a system maintains its own stuckness. So a realization that alone can prompt reorganization. There are some ethical challenges to all of this. The strategic model's directive and sometimes covert techniques may seem like they may be manipulative or dishonest. Therefore, the therapist must be transparent and look for informed consent. So there were critics that argued that they could influence or deceive their clients, but Solovey and Duncan in 1992 can be practiced ethically, and as long as a therapist is very upfront about their intentions and they can help them to reframe what's happening. So it's really against the therapist's best interest to be deceptive because people pick that up pretty quickly. So AAMFT Code of Ethics requires therapists to protect the clients, to avoid manipulative practices, and so they have to have informed consent, has to be transparent, and the therapist has to pay attention to power dynamics, culture, context, and also try to keep their own bias out of it. There was a third example that was given on a vignette with a cross-dressing couple, and the therapist had to be sure that, they didn't interject their own morality beliefs about that, but help the couple to actually reframe their problem and work through it. So, in conclusion, I like this, I believe, because it is creative and solution focused. I do think it is dangerous if I were completely transparent about the strategy that I was giving, but there's probably a fine line of too much transparency, because would it backfire? And I don't really know. It does align with ethical standards and practice, and it does continue to bring meaningful change. Thank you for listening.